A few years ago, I was in between jobs and not having all that much to do. I thought I'd rent a camper van and go on a long, extended vacation. I ran all the numbers, and while I could have used my savings and flown somewhere nice for a week, with a van, I could take a 3 or 4 week vacation. And I wasn't a city person either. I loved nature and wanted to get out and try camping in a slightly safer and more accessible way. I didn't know how I'd feel, or if I'd be comfortable being alone in the middle of nowhere with just a tent, but being in a secure metal box with the ability to drive away felt like it'd be better, at least for my first couple of times anyway. I got the van and headed north to where all the national forests and free public lands for camping were. The first couple of days of traveling, I ended up staying the night at truck stops just to sleep and continue traveling. I think I was trying a little too hard to have my first campsite be some spectacular place, rather than just paying for a nice campground or something where I could settle in and figure out exactly what I was doing. But it was on my third day that I finally had a chance to camp in the wilderness. I was on a long stretch of road with nothing but public lands for miles in all directions. There was an app I was using to try to find campsites others had stayed at, and I had a few marked on my GPS just in case one didn't work out. But what I didn't plan for was that none of them did. Every time I'd reach one of the spots, there was nothing there. No trail, no other campers, just nothing. I must have driven an hour on this unpaved, rugged road, failing to find any of the campsites I'd picked out. I began getting frustrated, knowing I was getting really far away, and it was getting late. I felt like I was racing against the sun because I knew once it was down, finding one of the seemingly invisible trails would be impossible. I couldn't even go on the app to look up different nearby campsites either because I no longer had service. I would have had to drive an hour back just to find some more campsites that might not even be there. So I kept driving, and after a while I happened to barely see a path leading away from the main road. I was already 30 minutes past all the campsites I had marked, and this was the first trail that I'd found. It looked even more rugged than the current road I was on, but the van could definitely fit, and while I couldn't check the app to see if this was a campsite others had stayed at, I figured it had to be, as it was connected to the same road that all the other ones were supposedly on. I backed up and pulled onto the trail. My headlights lit up the way as I slowly drove through the trees and down the path. It went on for about 5 minutes, and then I reached the end. Just a single small spot, barely large enough for the van to fit on. There were no other little paths going to different campsites. It was just this one, which to me, for my first time being out in the wilderness, was unsettling. I hoped wherever I'd stay would have other campers nearby just so I'd feel comfortable. Being entirely alone just felt a bit much for my first time. I stayed parked for a few minutes, sitting in the front seat still and looking out to the woods. There was this really dreadful feeling in me about this place. I hated how alone I felt, and my gut was telling me to leave, that something wasn't right. On any other normal day, I would have pulled out, reassessed, and found somewhere else to go, but I was so frustrated that I just settled. I also thought, since it was my first time being out here, maybe my mind was panicking more than it should be, simply because I was out of my comfort zone. I turned off the van and moved to the back. It was already dark out, so there wasn't much I could do outside of the van until the morning. I laid on the bed for a minute to relax after the drive, but then I heard a crunching steps outside the van, and before I could even get up, there was a loud knock at the driver's side window. I'd only been there for a few minutes, so I was sure it had to be another camper. I must have missed them while driving down or just didn't see the other campsite. I walked up to the front and saw a man standing by the door peering through the window at me. He gave a short, sort of awkward, not trying to bother you smile. I asked if everything was okay. He said yeah, that his name was Mike, and he just wanted to swing by and say hello to his neighbor before it got too dark. Now, of course, I was new to all of this, so I wasn't sure if this was common courtesy or what. A few things struck me as strange, though. One is that I still had no idea where he was camping or how he was this close to where I was. And two is that it was already dark. The sun had been down for a while. Lastly, the man was very twitchy, shifting around a lot, and his eyes constantly darted over my shoulder, like toward the opening into the back of the van, kind of like he was expecting or waiting to see someone else come up behind me, which just made me more nervous about being alone. I said thanks for stopping by, being nice but trying to cut off the conversation because of the weird feeling I was getting. As I started to back out of the window, I noticed the man didn't move. He kept his feet planted and watched move into the back of the van. I waited 15 seconds before peeking through the curtain, and when I did, he wasn't there. Immediately, I started looking out the smaller windows around the van, looking for lights or something to show me where his campsite was, or even where he walked off to. Surely he had a lantern or flashlight to walk through the woods with. I was able to look out pretty much every side of the van, and I didn't see any lights or see him walking around anywhere. The trees surrounding my van were all dark and quiet, no signs of a camp being nearby. I thought about leaving again because, of course, it didn't feel great being alone in the middle of the woods with this guy. That gave me a strange feeling, but I thought if I could just see where he went or where he was staying, I'd feel a lot safer, like he wouldn't be able to sneak up on me next time. I checked out the windows for maybe 20 minutes, circling around and never seeing a thing, before I realized if I couldn't figure this out, then I would have to leave, and I really didn't want to go through all of that again, so I decided to get a better look. I went to the front, opened the door, and stepped outside. It was extremely quiet and nearly pitch black in all directions. Even the trail I came down was hardly visible. I stood there and turned my head, looking around for any signs. I felt this looming, uneasy feeling in the air that made my whole body have chills again. My gut was telling me to leave, and that's when I heard a short shuffling sound right behind me. I moved to the other side of the van and looked around, not seeing anything. The sound came right behind me, though. I hesitated, then slowly knelt down, looking under the van. I only caught a glimpse of the man's eyes looking back at me before I jumped up and ran back inside. I heard him call out, and the van shook a couple times as he crawled out. I only got in a couple seconds before he jumped up and started banging on the door. He was still twitchy and strange, and his eyes had a savage, animalistic, violent look. It almost reminded me of animals with rabies. That's how insane he looked. He was punching the window with everything he had. I turned the van on and started driving. I could hear him trying to grab onto the van, still trying to get in. The trail out was rough, and I really couldn't afford a flat tire or getting stuck with this guy chasing me. So several times as I was trying to get out, the man caught up and tried to break in still. But it was around halfway that I'd gotten enough distance and was able to get back to the still rugged but better road. I drove 2 hours back to a small town. I didn't sleep at all that night thinking about what had happened. I genuinely think if I had stayed or the man had gotten on, I never would have been able to leave that forest and probably never be seen again. The look in his eyes and the crazy sadistic behavior he had once I found him hiding still terrifies me to even remember.
I was backpacking alone through a state forest, an 80-mile stretch of wilderness where the trees are thick and the rangers are non-existent. In a place like this, you have to reserve designated sites just so there's a record of your existence, just in case you don't come back. I had my path set, mile 12 the first night, mile 26 the second. I thought I was alone. I was wrong. The first day was peaceful. Off-season meant empty trails and heavy silence. I fell asleep early, but sometime around 3 a.m., I drifted awake to a sound that didn't belong. Footsteps, heavy, rhythmic crunching on the trail right past my tent. I was too exhausted to care, figuring it was just another hiker pushing through the night. I fell back asleep, not realizing that was my first warning. The second day's hike was grueling, steeper, deeper into the forest. By the time I reached the mile 26 marker, the sun was bleeding out behind the peaks. I got my fire going, enjoying the isolation, or at least I tried to. Around 9 p.m., I saw it, a light. a small, bouncing headlamp moving through the trees from the direction I'd come. I froze. If this was the same person from last night, how hadn't I passed them on the trail today? I watched as the light got closer. Then, abruptly, it stopped. The beam turned toward my camp for a split second, then veered sharply off trail into the black heart of the forest. 20 seconds later, the light clicked off. Total darkness. No footsteps, no light, just someone out there, sitting in the dark, watching my fire. An hour passed. My body refused to let me sleep. Every nerve was screaming. Then I heard it, a faint, deliberate crunch of leaves just 10 yards behind my back. Someone was trying to be silent, and they were close. I spun around, clicking my high-lumen flashlight on. The beam cut through the dark and landed directly on a man. He didn't look like a hiker. No backpack, no gear, just regular clothes, standing there like he'd been born in the shadows. He didn't blink, he didn't run. He just stood there until I yelled, "What the hell are you doing?" Then a slow, sickening smile spread across his face. He started walking toward me. As he got closer, a wave of cold realization hit me. I recognized him. I'd seen his face before, maybe in my town, maybe in passing, but we were not friends. We had never spoken. Then he said my name. He greeted me like an old pal, his voice dripping with a forced, creepy friendliness. My blood turned to ice. He hadn't just found me tonight, he had been trailing me for days. He'd followed me from my home into the woods, waiting for the moment I was most vulnerable. He said my name again, sounding confused, almost offended that I was backing away. I didn't say a word. I grabbed my pack, adrenaline dumping into my system. His face went flat. His eyes went dead. "What are you doing now?" he asked in a cold, monotone voice. I didn't answer. I strapped my bag on and bolted toward the trail. He screamed my name one last time, a raw, aggressive yell that echoed through the trees, and I heard him sprint after me. I hiked through the entire night using my satellite phone to reach the authorities. I made it out. He didn't. The rangers searched, but they found nothing. No car at the trailhead, no registration. To get out of that forest without gear, he would have had to hike dozens of miles off-trail through lethal terrain. Part of me is terrified that he's still out there, watching from the shadows of my everyday life. But a darker part of me, I hope he never made it out of those woods. I hope the forest took him.
The woods are supposed to be a place of clarity, a place to escape the noise. But in the deep wilderness, silence isn't always peace. Sometimes, silence is a warning. This happened last fall, and it's the reason I'll never set foot in a national park alone again. I live fairly close to a network of trails. I'm the kind of person who packs a bag on a whim and just heads out. No plan, just a map and a tent. It was a spontaneous trip, one of those quick getaways that usually clears my head. But the moment I pulled up to the trailhead, an hour from my small town, the air felt heavy. My car was the only one there, no rangers, no day hikers, just me. I locked up, threw my pack over my shoulders, and began the trek. The woods were dead silent. No birds, no wind, just the rhythm of my own boots hitting the dirt. I was about 3 miles in, eyes fixed on the trail, when I heard it. Crunch, crack, heavy footsteps. Ahead of me, something was moving through the tree line fast. As the figure rounded the bend, my stomach dropped. It was a man, but he wasn't hiking. He was in a dead sprint. I stepped off the trail to give him room. As he flew past me, I caught a glimpse of his face. He didn't look frightened. He looked shattered. His eyes were glazed over, staring right through me like I was a ghost. He didn't even acknowledge I was there. I stood there for a few seconds, watching him disappear into the green. Something felt wrong. 30 seconds later, a cold instinct told me to look back. My heart stopped.
The man had stopped running. He was standing perfectly still, 100 yards back, staring directly at me. I didn't wait. I turned my head and kept walking, my pulse drumming in my ears. When I finally looked back again, the trail was empty. He was just gone. Now here was my mistake. I started wondering, was he running from something, and was I walking straight into it? But the thought of turning back toward a man that unstable was worse. I took my chances. I pushed deeper into the woods. I reached the campsite as the sun began to dip. It wasn't a site in the traditional sense, just a patch of dirt in the middle of towering ancient trees. As the light faded, the silence turned suffocating. I built a small fire, just a tiny flicker for comfort. That's when I heard it again. Thud, thud, thud. Sprinting footsteps, maybe 100 yards out. Then dead silence, like they just vanished into the shadows. In a moment of pure, adrenaline-fueled panic, I made a horrible decision. I smothered the fire. Suddenly, I was in total pitch black. I stood there, paralyzed, listening to my own heartbeat. Then it happened. Someone was sprinting again, but this time they were coming directly toward my tent. The footsteps stopped abruptly, right in front of me. My eyes slowly adjusted to the dark. There, behind a thin pine tree, maybe 15 feet away, a figure was standing, half hidden, just observing me. It wasn't the man from the trail. This person was smaller, moving with a terrifying, calculated stillness. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, two shadows staring at each other. The figure eventually began to back away, fading into the trees without a single sound. No twigs snapping, no rustling leaves. They were moving like they were barefoot. I didn't wait for a second encounter. I packed my gear in a blurred frenzy, my flashlight trembling. I hiked back to the trailhead in record time, convinced I could feel eyes on the back of my neck with every step. I made it to my car, locked the doors, and tore out of those woods. It wasn't until the next morning that I saw it. On the passenger side door, there were deep, fresh scratches in the paint. The handle was mangled. The latch had been pulled back with so much force that it snapped, leaving the handle useless. Someone hadn't just been watching me in the woods. They had been at my car. They had tried to get in while I was miles away at the campsite. I don't know who was running or who was watching. All I know is that someone was waiting for me to come back, and I'm never going back.